and welcome back to the Ecuador Insider Podcast. Jesse Bayer, Ryan Pemberton, Carl Marsan. Today's show is on the Paro, the national strike. So thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoy this video, please give it a like, give it a thumbs up, share, subscribe to the channel. We'd love you to hit the bell as well. You'll get the notifications. We do pump out a lot of content here. So this is an interesting topic. So we were actually scheduled to record this on Wednesday. Today is Friday, July 1st. The Paro just ended yesterday. So it is now over as of Thursday, the 30th of June. And we were scheduled to record this a couple of days prior, but Carl was getting his beauty rest. And so we couldn't do that. And so here we are, a couple of days later, and one day after we were recorded or scheduled to give our thoughts on the Paro, it ended. So very interesting. We'll give a little bit kind of the history and the background of what goes on here politically, because I think it's something that if you're, I'm putting this here. Sorry, give me 1 second here, guys. I think it's something if you're not familiar with sort of the politics of Latin America and how that looks, it can be pretty weird, right? To look at what goes on here from the international, through an international lens. And then you get on top of that sort of, you're not here, so you're not on the ground. So you're consuming your information through whatever sources you can find, right? And the only things that make the international press here are, sort of events of a certain kind. Now, of course, this that just happened should have made the international press, certainly, but the way that it's covered can be interesting. So anyways, we're going to dive into all that. We're going to give our thoughts. And, at the end of the day, we're three foreigners in Ecuador. We've been here a long time. We've been here a long time. We have our thoughts, but that's all they are. We're not experts on Ecuadorian politics. Certainly, we're not experts on the culture or the history. We're three expats who live here who, have integrated certainly over the years, and we speak the language, and that's the extent, right, of our, our ability to talk about this. So this will just be our opinion. But it's definitely been interesting. If you're wondering about the retreat, we've got about 5 spots left for that as of now. And so our first retreat is on July 16th here in Vilcabamba. That's going to be a lot of fun. The preparations are done, and we're looking forward to hosting that here on July 16th. But there are a few slots left. If you're still looking to come check out Vilcabamba, we'd love to have you. All right. So I guess the first, sort of to kick this off, I think we have to kind of take a little bit broader context historically, and then we can get into what happened this go around. But, I got here in 2013. Carl got here a couple of years before I did. And I've seen this happen, I don't know, 5-6 times or so in the 9 years that I've been here. There's been some sort of road closure activity, which is kind of the central theme of these strikes, is that they shut down the main throughways in the country and then march on Quito. And if you go back to before I was here, and it would actually be really fun to have sort of a historian on the channel, who's from here, who could talk about this a little more expertly than we can. But prior to when I got here, between something like 1999 and 2006, or 97 and 2006, something like that, Ecuador had a number of these where they actually were able to have the president step down and hold new elections. So that happened a number of times prior to 2006. Has not happened since 2006 that there's been a president that stepped down. Most of these have been pretty small scale. You kind of hear about them, they sort of start to materialize and then don't. This is the second or third since I've been here that actually turned into a ongoing event that was, that captured the country's attention. So yeah, that's interesting. There was one time, I want to say it was probably 2015 or 14, where I thought they were pretty close there was an agreement, or there was concessions made on a Friday by Lenin Moreno's government that I thought if it had gone through the weekend, I'm not sure he would have made it through the weekend. So there was one time they were close under Moreno. This was not particularly close, although it got there was a couple of days ago where it looked like, oh boy, this is going to get really bad now. And then 2 days later, it was resolved with what I consider to be fairly minor concessions. So we'll jump into all of that. I'll give my thoughts, but let me kick it over to you guys for initial thoughts, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the specifics of this particular event.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a couple days ago, it looked like it was getting pretty intense and it could be going in that direction. And I feel like maybe that's some of the international press going in and making something out to be intense, right? So part of Abundant Living here, we didn't want to make a video about the Paro because for us, there was nothing going on. In Loja and Vilcabamba, it was everything as normal, right? So we had all of our food, we had fuel, we had supplies, and there wasn't a shortage of anything, except Carl couldn't find avocados one day. And he was like telling us, like, dude, there's no avocados in town, man. Like, what am I going to do? I eat like 18 avocados a day, And we're like, I don't know, man. Jesse comes back like 10 minutes later with a picture of an entire, like, I don't know. It was an entire aisle of avocados, it seemed like. And it's like, Carl, you just had to look at the next tienda, right? There was avocados. He's like, there was no avocados. So, even in that instance, Carl, I felt he was a little sensational about, hey, there's no avocados. We're starting to feel the pressure here. And it's like, okay, well, we were still getting avocados. So I think sometimes media will capture something and, roll it out on the open market for people to digest and then formulate their opinions of Ecuador. We were getting a lot of people reaching out to us saying, hey, you're going to make this video. And, we didn't really feel like there was anything serious going on until, again, a couple of days ago, it looked like maybe it was going to escalate. And, I'll leave my political opinion aside, but I think that the last, 3-4 days was slightly suspect. But yeah, they've come to a resolution and now it's over. So yeah, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about why, we didn't see a impact on that. I don't know if you guys, Carl, if you have an opinion of that, like why didn't we see the impact in the Loja Vilcabamba area? Because the other larger cities, it seemed there was an impact. Cuenca, Guayaquil, Quito, probably Manta as well, experiencing some shortages on things. But we didn't. And is that something that Jesse back, when you'd seen them happen before, was the case then as well?
Well, let me chime in. I can tell you the reasons why I believe we weren't super affected here. And yeah, if you compare, Vilcabamba, Loja to other places like Quito and Cuenca, it was significantly different. I mean, I have reports from people in Quito that, there was no food on the shelves, there was no propane, gasoline, things like this. And the main reason really is because there are a lot of indigenous communities in those areas, right around Quito, Cotacachi, Otavalo, same thing around Cuenca with Saraguro. In the jungle, in the Oriente, there was indigenous communities there that were protesting. Whereas here, we don't really have a large indigenous community at all. So nobody was blocking any of the roads between Vilcabamba and Loja, between Vilcabamba, Malacatos, and Catamayo, which is also which is where the airport is, which is where there's a refinery for propane, for example. And I believe even the road between Catamayo and the coast was open. So somehow in our region here, we weren't affected barely at all. All food products were able to come here, except a few days without avocados. Probably they hadn't gotten the shipment. There was a few other things, people were talking about. There was a few other things that we weren't able to get, but it wasn't like, it was really minor. Same thing with propane. We were able to get propane the whole time. I went to fill up my tank with gasoline, many times. And every time I was wondering, like, maybe there's not going to be gasoline, or, for some reason the roads were open. So it was quite amazing and quite a blessing to be in this area during this time, because there were people that were affected, significantly in other areas. So I can understand people making videos and worried about the situation. Over here, we're kind of in a little bubble, maybe geographically for the reasons that I've mentioned, but also, it's kind of off the beaten paths. There were no roads that were blocked here. There was one day, I believe, where the people from Southern Ecuador came south of Loja and blocked for like half of the day. Motorcycles were still able to drive through, but like I said, we really weren't affected here. So that was quite amazing. And yeah, it's really because there are small indigenous communities here, but they didn't protest. They're smaller. They don't have that type of mentality. I believe there are some indigenous, like in Vilcabamba, there's a neighborhood. I don't think these guys were even considering protesting anything here. So those are probably the main reasons why we weren't affected.
Yeah, and so again, I want to sort of kind of jump back a little bit into some of the broader picture, and then we'll give some specifics too as to what the protest or the strike was about as well. But so if you're from the States like me and you grew up, ignorant and brainwashed by Hollywood like me, right? And you see Latin American politics and you don't understand, right? There's dictators and there's governments being overthrown and there's revolutions and they look crazy. You're like, it's hard to put that in context certainly through Hollywood anyway, right? And so, but it is a different dynamic, right? It's hard to imagine coming from the US, the people sort of on the ground having any ability to affect change. That's just doesn't seem possible, right? I've even in my younger days, I lived in New York for many years. I attended a couple of massive protests against one thing or another, in my early 20s. And it looks like, you look at it, there's millions of people. It looks like the whole world's going to change as a result of this. It hardly makes the news, right? It's hard to imagine people back home actually having the ability to say like, hey, we're going to stop this and it's going to change. In Latin America, that's not the case, right? In Latin America, there's this dynamic where there's these indigenous communities. They have some degree of autonomy within their communities under the law. And when things go in a direction that they don't like, they do something about it physically. And it's very much, representative, symbolic. Thank you is the word I'm looking for. It's very much symbolic, right? Like there's guys out there with spears, they're not spears for fighting, right? It's symbolic. The government certainly has the arms and the people do not. And it's not that kind of thing where there's going to be shooting and bloodshed in a civil war. That's not what it is. It's just people taking to the streets, shutting down the roads, which does put pressure on everybody, and then sort of just showing themselves as like, hey, this is going to change. And it kind of, they exert pressure, and then there's talks that happen and things get, talked about and things change. That's kind of, and that goes on all over Latin America is my understanding. Like that, I've talked to friends who are from, other countries in Latin America, and this goes on there too. So this is not, I don't think, unique to Ecuador, but it is a different dynamic. And it's a dynamic personally that, I kind of like. And the reason I like it is because it puts a counterweight on the power of government. Right. So if somebody is crazy in office, right, if the government is doing things that are way out of line and against the interests of everyday people, there's actually something that can be done about it. I don't always agree with the goals of the protests over the years. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I appreciate that there's this power base that isn't only coming out of the politicians in Quito, right? That there's actually a human power base that can affect change. And so, this is just kind of part of Latin American politics. And it's an adjustment to your mindset, certainly, if you're going to live in Latin America, because it's not, in Canada. I mean, in Canada, they had that big truckers something or other that was going on.
Convoy.
convoy. Like, I don't think that changed anything at all, right? Or maybe it did. I don't know, but it's a different dynamic. You know what I mean? The other point I want to make, kind of to your point, Ryan, is that, a lot of people who are making videos about Ecuador have not been here for very long, don't necessarily speak the language, and don't necessarily understand the culture. And they're making sort of what I would refer to even as sensationalized videos that are based just solely in their opinion. And that's, that's fine. That's kind of what we're doing as well, just giving our thoughts here. But we didn't, we also, to your point, like, we didn't want to put a video out panicking people, because there really was not a reason to panic. The worst thing that possibly could have happened here, in my opinion, is that there could have been a regime change if this had gone on long enough. That was always very unlikely, and it didn't end up going that way at all. But that's the worst, there wasn't going to be anything worse than that. And you've got people putting out, sort of panic videos, and, we don't want to do that, right? We've been here a long time. We understand this place as well as you can anyway, from not being from here. And so we wanted to sort of, we wanted to wait and put out a video that is more based in reality. To your guys' point too about this area, it's always been like that, right? Carl, I don't recall a time. I don't recall a time. I think there was 1 day or 2 days when they did a strike that fizzled out very quickly. I think it's somewhere around 2016. There's maybe 1 or 2 days where they blocked the road from Vilcabamba to Loja, the transport companies. Other than that, I don't remember in my entire time here, my 9 years here, there ever being a time where this area was affected. And I think that is, this area is kind of its own unique place. It is less developed than some places in the country, for sure. It's off the beaten path, as you said. And it's part of what makes it special here, I think.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yep.
Yeah, there was one time where the taxi drivers blocked some of the roads just around Vilcabamba on the way to Loja as well, because the fuel was going up in price. And like you said, it lasted maybe 1 or 2 days, which is, back to your point, like, here, the people have power, and it's not that difficult to, create enough of an issue for the government to consider making changes in their policies. They have to block like 3-4 roads, and it's like, okay, nobody can circulate, at least by land. And then the government has to figure out, some kind of solution. And yeah, the other thing I was going to say, flights were still, there were still flights between Quito and Loja. So, we actually had people that just this week, a few days ago, that flew into Quito, took a domestic flight into Loja, and were able to come to Vilcabamba without any issues. Yep. Yeah, land travel was not possible between those cities, but flights were still available. So that's and I don't think that could ever change. Indigenous can't they can't block the air.
Well, let's drill down on that really quick, Carl, because so the road between Catamayo and Vilcabamba, or Catamayo and Loja, is not a road that, have we ever seen roadblocks on those roads? Especially the road between Catamayo and Vilcabamba. It's just this backcountry windy road. It's all rural properties that they're farming. There's no cities or anything. So there's no reason for anybody to come and block that road, because there's no traffic. What point would they make to block that road? Now, when they block roads between Cuenca and Loja, those are two larger cities. There's more punch to blocking those roads, because they're trying to make a point to the government, because they want to get their way. The indigenous have a motive, and this is blocking the roads is the way they do it. But there's no reason to block these roads when, a car goes by every 15 minutes or whatever it is. So I think that also gives us this little buffer as well, that we'll probably always have domestic flights coming into Loja, and then a nice taxi ride to Vilcabamba, even if these things, I don't know, if they come up with something else in the future to strike about, which, they might. Like, this is something that they're doing, but I never thought for 1 minute that the government would let their people starve, right? So, like, some of the sensationalized reporting, it does make it look like, you know, the economy is going to tank. Ecuador is going down. You know, people are, you know, starving in the streets, people laying everywhere, you know, food banks shortage, you know, like all of the, I don't think we saw any of that, but like, that's the type of sensation that you get when you just read international news, but you have no context for living in Ecuador and what the politics are actually like. And then also Jesse mentioned that some of the indigenous would have spears. Do they have spears? What's that about? Like, basically Ecuadorians are the kindest people ever. And so they block roads. Like, that's what they're doing to strike. They're just chilling out all day, blocking roads. And that's the majority of the country. Not the country. That's the majority of the people protesting, is they're standing around blocking roads. Now, there are some of the youth probably in Guayaquil and Quito who are wanting something to be a part of. And so it's like, all right, the next strike, let's get behind it. And, you know, they'll go out and gather and stuff like that because, yeah, of course, they want their, they want to be able to work or, you know, have food and all that stuff. Of course, like I get that, but still, they're not being violent for the majority and the most part, like you see in the United States, for example, when they protest, it's seriously out of hand and there's tear gas going off everywhere and they're starting fires. They start cars on fires and roll them over, you know, like cop cars, roll them over, start them on fire. And like, it's really aggressive and intense, but that's not the way it is here, even though, like Jesse was saying, Hollywood will make it look that way to you over the years, over the decades. So then all I have to do is roll out a news report about Ecuador. And in your mind, you think Ecuador, it's the same as Honduras and Venezuela and all this stuff. It's like they're very angry and they're, you know, they're rising up again and, you know, oh, don't go to Ecuador. And it's the opposite. Literally, if you were here and you saw the roadblock, they're just sitting around drinking coffee, socializing, waiting for them to try to get their way. And, you know, they have an organization. Jesse, what is it called? K09 or?
Yeah, Konai, but that's, yeah, I don't even want to, I can't even speak expertly enough on that.
No, I can't either, but they've got an organization basically that quote unquote represents them. But, you know, I mean, again, they're just kind of doing what they're doing and it's relatively peaceful.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have to like also be, you know, balanced. Like there was a little bit of confrontation with, you know, between police, military, and some indigenous in some areas. That didn't happen everywhere. I saw some footage, but as Jesse said, when you mentioned spears, I believe I've seen footage where the military is there with their, you know, plastic shields, and these guys are armed, like they're military, right? And then the indigenous are there with these wooden sticks and pushing the military guys back, you know. And the military is not attacking them. I mean, they could crush them if they wanted to, but they were like backing down, you know. And the indigenous were there with their literally with big wooden sticks, you know, pushing these big military guys like fully armed. And I think the government purposefully, you know, wanted to avoid any type of like, you know, serious, you know, confrontation, violent confrontation. I believe one soldier might have died, right, in some, you know, altercation. That's
there was two or three deaths, I think, over the course of it. But there's also the question of what groups are taking advantage of the strike for their own purposes and their own agenda. So, you know, it's Ecuador, like any country in the world, right, has other elements in society that look for opportunities to take advantage and do whatever they're doing. So there was a little bit of that goes on, and people here understand that, right? Like I'm talking to Ecuadorians all day, every day. And when it's something like that's going on, I'm doing my own sort of canvassing, right? I'm doing my own sort of poll, you know, just finding out what people think and where people's heads are at from different levels of society and so on and so forth. People here are sharp, like when it comes to their own country and what's going on here, like they know the deal. You know, they know what's real, what isn't real, what's being taken advantage of, what isn't. So there was definitely, you know, a few incidents of violence. I don't know, you know, I don't think, you know, I think they were isolated because there was only a few incidents, but there was also, you know, there's a lot of rumors about those not really being about the strike, you know, those being other groups using the strike to carry out their own interests. So
That's right.
There was some of that going on as well. All right, cool. Well, I have here, and by the way, the strike went on for 18 days. So that was what it was, almost 3 weeks, about 2.5 weeks. I have here the list of, I guess it's, let's see, 10, I think, no, 8 agreements that ended the strike. So there was basically what happened was there was a meeting between Lasso and I think it was Issa, who's an interesting guy, who kind of semi-represented the strike, at least for a chunk of it. But most people here don't think much of him, which is interesting. People kind of are like, oh, he's another one. He's just after his own interests kind of thing. But so there was a deal. There was a meeting between them that fell apart. All of a sudden, both sides go back and are, rah, 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 rah. And so I'm getting nervous at that point. Like, oh man, this thing's going to drag out and go on for a while. And then I don't remember if it was 1 day later or 2 days later after that happened, a third party got in to sort of mediate negotiations between the government and now several different representatives of different groups among the opposition. And I guess I think they hammered out an agreement in the matter of like half a day or something like that, because I think those talks just started yesterday and then they reached agreement. I don't believe it was the day before, but that would have been the most it was. Okay, so here's what they agreed on. They agreed to lower gas prices by 15 cents on regular unleaded as well as diesel. So that will go regular unleaded countrywide will be $2.40. Diesel will be $1.75. That's the first agreement. The second agreement is to get rid of Act 95 or Decree 95, Executive Decree 95. I don't know what that is. That refers to to petroleum. So something to do with petroleum. They changed that agreement. They agreed to, and I'm sorry, I'm translating this as I read here, so that's why I sound disjointed here. But they agreed to reform Executive Decree 151, saying that they cannot realize mining activity in protected and archaeological areas. So that's interesting. That was a big issue in this. I think the two central themes were really gas prices and cost of living prices in general, which are going up globally, as we know. But here it's mostly a result of gas prices and then mining in indigenous areas, which is very much not wanted in certain indigenous areas. So I think that's good that happened. And then let's see, number 4 is, this is something to do with the Amazonian territory, but again, it's just referring to an act. Number 5 is okay. So number 5 involves, careful, buddy. Number 5 involves 4 things they got rid of, having to do with basically making more emergency health services available in rural areas, compensating human development, and intercultural and bilingual education, I assume in rural areas as well.
Okay.
Government has agreed to intensify operations and mechanisms for the control and prevention of speculative processes that raise prices. So again, that's sort of the cost of living stuff, I assume. And then the gas price as well is mentioned again there. Number 6 is I don't even know what that is talking about. Number 7, there will be a continued dialogue for 90 days in order to implement all of this stuff. And then number 8 is just that the indigenous, declare the end of their movement. So basically gas prices got lowered and mining got prohibited in indigenous areas and a little bit more, protections in the Amazon. The rest of it, I think, is pretty much symbolic from what I gather.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm getting hammered by the sun right now. It does feel amazing. I'm 2 hours behind you guys, so we're still at like 5-something a.m. here.
Wow.
6:37, but close enough. Close enough.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, you guys got
Good.
any last thoughts here on this topic?
No, I mean, I'm thankful that the Paro is over, for what it is and for the tension that it created throughout the country. It's sad a little bit just because it seemed like it was polarizing Ecuador a little bit towards the end there. At least a lot of the people who were out on the social media networks were like, pick a side and that kind of a thing. And yeah, that's not really what you want to see, is people picking sides and it polarizing a country. But it lasted for what, like 24, 36 hours or something, and then it lifted. So I think at the end of the day, there's a win for Ecuador here, that they've come to an agreement and things can go back to normal. Again, all COVID mandate restrictions or anything like that is all over. So, the country was already getting back to normal. And so it's going to completely go back to normal. No restrictions, people going back to work, distribution of goods and all of that is back on. So very exciting.
Yeah, and just, one other thought actually I did want to leave is, I think a lot of people, probably ourselves included, who live in, the Vilcabamba of Loja region or many parts of Ecuador even, probably one of the driving forces, or at least one of the factors for a lot of us, I think is, lifestyle certainly and all the other things, but on that list for a lot of people are sort of food security, right, and water security, and being close to your resources. And I think these kinds of events, whether it's the inflation and the supply chain issues you're seeing in the States and elsewhere, or whether it's this political movement we just saw happen here, or this social movement we just saw happen here in Ecuador, it really drives home, I think, that point of number one, it's really nice to live in an area where just about everybody produces food, or you can just walk outside and pick fruits off your trees, that everybody has. That's not special that you have. Everybody's got some of those trees. Pretty, I'm exaggerating, but just almost everybody. And so it's nice for that reason. And then it's also nice to be in a place where, there is the conditions are such that food shortages are just not really ever going to be a huge issue in this region of Ecuador. And you're in a place where if you want to grow lots of food yourself, it's really easy to do. You can do that here year round with very little, effort and difficulty. It's not difficult in this climate and this environment to, sort of feed your whole family from your land. That's really easy here if you wanted to do that. It's not like back home where you're dealing with winter and all kinds of costs and regulations and stuff that goes into,
that's right,
farming. So I think it's, it sort of drove home that point for me, as well as you're looking at people in Quito who are complaining about not having X, Y, or Z, or in Cuenca where there's some shortages of X, Y, or Z, or Manta or wherever. And it's like, well, number one, we're not having that in this region. And then number two, if you're growing your own stuff, you don't care anyway. Right. So it's interesting point in this, interesting thing to point out in the context of this as well.
Yeah, that is a blessing to be able to have that type of food security in Vilcabamba, because there's more food being grown by your neighbor than what's even you're able to eat for everybody in Ecuador or in Vilcabamba. So it's going out to Ecuador, all of the food, and internationally from our region. So, even if they in the future have more strikes, so there are more restrictions or anything else, which perhaps is coming to a city near you, wherever you're at, right? Food shortages. So Vilcabamba is a strategic location to be able to have that type of food security. Because even if you can't grow your own food because you don't know how, there's still enough in Vilcabamba always, because everybody's growing, that there'll always be enough food, right? So that's the amazing part of that area.
Yeah. I was going to say Vilcabamba and the surrounding towns as well. Vilcabamba used to be even more agricultural than it is now. But the other towns around it are still very, very agricultural. So there's tons of food being grown in the general area, not just Vilcabamba specifically, but everywhere around it.
Yep. That's right.
All right. Very
Cool.
good. Well, again, thank you everybody for tuning in. Please do give this video a like, share, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you hit the bell as well. We probably close to a video a day is coming out between the content as well as the real estate, the properties that we have for sale. Also, July 16th, again, is the start of our retreat. You can find a link to that at abecuador.com. We'd love to have you there, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.
Have a great day.